Hello everyone, my name is Daniela Tobias, and today I'm going to be presenting about Racism Hurts, exploring the health impacts of anti-Indigenous racism. Hope you guys enjoy. I would also like to acknowledge the land that we stand on of the Mississauga New Credit First Nation. So we're going to be starting off with talking about colonialism, and unfortunately this still happens till this day. And essentially what this process is the process of controlling indigenous people with certain types of policies or practices. So some examples that I can think of is how when there were residential schools and they used to separate children, indigenous children from their families. And what they try to do is try to implement their own policies, their own practices, their own religions onto these children in order for them for their culture essentially to be erased. Um, so yeah, that's an example that comes to mind. And how has colonialism continued through the decades is that they established a belief that for some reason that they have defected genes and that they're seen more as weak or more susceptible to diseases. But of course, this is not true, but they have established that mindset, and there's a big denial of colonialization and a big denial in racism. And unfortunately this occur since there is this belief that they have defective genes, then it causes them to be treated differently around their communities or around their doctors that might have this colonialization belief or this kind of racism thought. Now, moving on to how racism can actually affect indigenous people is by making it hard for them to find jobs, because since there is racism in the community or in the workplace that they are in, it obviously makes them feel uncomfortable, makes them feel not wanted, and it causes them to quit their job. Or it can be that the person is there even though that they are tolerating that racism, they're still there working hard, but their bosses or their coworkers don't particularly like them as much, and it overall makes the boss fire them because of their racism, their racist beliefs for indigenous people. So it makes it hard, very hard for them to keep their jobs, and it also gives them stress that can impact their mental and physical health, of course, because if they don't have a job, then they don't like their mental health is unbalanced because they're under a lot of stress and pressure, and also causing them physical, also impacting their physical health, because that can sometimes, in like worst case scenarios, I know this is a big stereotype that happens, that indigenous people are seen as drug addicts or alcoholics, but sometimes these extreme situations can happen because of the racism that they're influencing. So this leads back to our title of our whole presentation, how racism can hurt. And this is a way that racism can hurt people, because then having all the stress, mental stress and physical stress, can lead them to engage in unhealthy activities such as smoking, alcohol, drug abuse, and can also be seen basically as a coping mechanism, trying to avoid the reality that they're in, and by engaging in these activities. And of course, these are in really extreme cases, because I know not all indigenous people are like this, but if this does happen to them, this can also happen to anyone. It is not even just indigenous people, but anyone that is experiencing racism can unfortunately lead them to this. And also racism affects indigenous people because it can cause them injuries by getting assaulted at people by people. For example, if they're just at the store trying to shop, they get assaulted by maybe by maybe someone throwing an apple at them or someone calling them racial slurs and then starting up a fight. So that is like a way that unfortunately affects them, because they can get seriously hurt by the end of the day, or even just by a person walking down the street and sees that they're indigenous and they have that hate in them towards that community, can cause them to assault them and have bad motives. All right, so now moving on to coping with racism. So the different ways of coping with racism all depends on the individual, because something can work for one person that cannot work for another person. So I'm gonna be listing some examples of coping with racism. Going to support groups is our first one on the list. And basically, this one is if you would like to share with other people what you have been going through, situations that you've had in the past, experiences. This can really help out, because you're letting go of your stress in a positive way, because you're talking to someone, and then you're also seeing other people's point of view on racism and experiences that they had, and you can also even pick up some strategies of how to cope, other strategies on how to cope with this, with racism, as well as creating your own community. If you feel like you are not able to go to a support group and talk to a bunch of strangers, because it is difficult for some people more than others, you can create your own community, your own little group of people who you are comfortable talking with. Maybe even create a group chat. It doesn't even have to be people of like the same race, I would say, because support groups is mostly like people that are going through the same thing as you, and you can get their perspective out of it. But it can be other people that in your community that you choose and that you trust. For example, your mother, your father, your best friend, your neighbor, someone who you really trust and can feel like you can express your emotions and what you're going through. As well as educating others. Educating others is a big thing, because then that can also in a way help stop racism, and you feel like you're doing a big part in helping not stop racism, but because it takes a long time, but avoid certain situations from happening. Also, I separated the list because these are more negative ways of coping that should not be done. I do not recommend doing, which is avoiding it. If you just avoid racism and not accept it, it's still gonna happen, and you are pushing all your stress down and not letting your stress out in a positive, healthy way. You're just avoiding with it and unfortunately denial, as well as just accepting it and not doing anything about it. Saying to yourself, okay, racism happens all the time, I'm just gonna live with it. No, that should not be the case, and you should not be treated the way that you are being treated, right? So just accepting it is not a healthy option as well. And at the bottom I put, we need more research on coping. I think, yes, we do need more research of coping, but I think a bigger point is that we need more research on how to educate others to help stop spread racism. To my last point, our duties as ECEs is educate, educate, educate. I think this is the most important point of all, because if we show children that we are all different but can live in unison, that will make such a big difference. Because I believe in order to stop racism or to avoid racism as little as possible, we need to start from when they are young. If an example that that you can tell kids is trees, right? Or leaves. There are a bunch of leaves on trees, and if you notice them, each and every single leaf is unique, different, individual in their own way, but they all live in a certain like community, which is the tree. They all live in this one tree. They all share one thing in common, which is that they live in one tree. right? The same tree, maybe different branches, which can represent different towns, different cultures, but they all have that thing that they are all human, that they all, well, not the leaves aren't human, but you get the analogy where I'm going, right? That they all share that we live in one earth, just as the leaves live in one tree. And also educating your families. If we educate our families, then afterwards they can spread that knowledge to someone else, and that other person can spread the knowledge to someone else. I left a link down below for the webinar if you would like to see it yourself. I thank you very much for watching my presentation. Have a good day. Bye.